how it connects with the argument that Turkey is a bridge between the East and West. This is a geographical and cultural cliche or cliche term that is heard a lot. Ever since the establishment of modern Turkish state, Westernization has been the main goal. And this Westernization has been connected with exclusion of the East. So Turkey, in the Turkish rhetoric, we turn our face to the West. We look at the West. The recent developments and recent changes in the foreign policy have shown that these two do not have to be mutually exclusive. Turkey can turn to the West and turn to the East as well. As Turkey tried to re-establish good relations with the neighbors, relationships with Iran, a lot of people said, oh, is this a shift of axis? Where is Turkish foreign policy axis shifting towards? But we have seen that there doesn't have to be a shift of axis. Going back to the cliched term, yes, Turkey can become like a bridge and connect the two sides. But there is an interesting point to that. Turkey has been presented as a role model, even by the EU. I didn't get a chance to mention that. By the EU as a role model to the African countries and the Middle East, without recognizing some of the shortcomings that Turkey is dealing with relation to establishing full democracy, establishing minority rights, and as one of the earlier questions or comments mentioned, dealing with the internal orientalizations that it has. Like I said, it's everywhere. I mean, every day I check, am I influenced by Orientalist views? But so this is all within the Turkish society as well. So Turkey is set as a role model to the Muslim countries, to the Arab world, to the Middle East. It is a good thing, but also there needs to be a recognition that Turkey has a long way to go in the democratization process as well. So in a sense, it can be a bridge between the two.
I don't have a question, but I would like to make two comments. About the question of Ranitime, I agree with you. I think Turkey is also Europeanizing its neighbors somehow, in the surrounding region, through using the instruments of the EU, like abolishing the visas, and also, for example, new education program is trying to develop by Turkey in order to make exchange with the universities in those countries and increase the cooperation among those universities, so which is similar to Erasmus, we can say. So these kind of measures and instruments of the EU are used in the neighboring regions of Turkey. So that's why also I think that the membership prospect of Turkey is crucial, and if really it will be a successful story at the end, although it's a pessimistic atmosphere now, I think at the end, it may lead to also the transformation of the surrounding region, and it will help the stability of the surrounding region. I also, if I have time, can I have a small thing about the European identity Turkey question, because I wrote my thesis on European identity construction and Turkey relations from identity perspective. I mean, I just would like to add that we should not see the EU as a monolithic entity, so there are different perceptions within the EU. So I made some interviews in Brussels for my thesis, and I observed that there is also another one understanding of European identity among the elites of the EU. For example, Christian Democrats define European identity in terms of Christianity, Roman Empire, and Greek heritage, and they usually have a tendency to look to Turkey's membership from a more cultural perspective. But the socialists, Greens, they have a more perception of value-based understanding of European identity, and they say that if Turkey will fulfill the Copenhagen criteria, and if Turkey will be a democratic country, more democratic country, human rights, rule of law, or if all these will be done, then Turkey can be a member. So they look from a more value-based perspective. So this is, I think, also important in order to understand the process. So I think that if there will be a shift in the political governments in the EU, some of the member states, the tendency may shift also. Thank you.
Emiliano, you want to answer?
If I may say a couple of words on the bridge metaphor and the risks of this metaphor, which was used in good faith, with good intentions by a lot of people in Europe and in the US. But I think in the end, if we look back at what happened, it backfired, because of course when you present Turkey as a bridge, you give a reason to those who don't want to have Turkey in the EU to say, listen, a bridge has at least two pillars, and if one pillar is on the other side, how can you be fully on our side? And but more than that, I think those in Europe in particular who have used this metaphor to promote Turkey EU integration are perhaps no less Orientalists than those who oppose it.
Yeah.
And they actually betray this inclination, mental inclination, by presenting Turkey as this country that, after all, is different, but is different in a way that we should somehow accept it. But the assumption is that there is a difference. And of course, we are all different. I'm not saying that Turkey doesn't have distinctive elements. But let's not be prisoners of these abstract definitions of what the West is and what the East is. Because if we are prisoners of them, we don't see the dynamic elements of this. I mean, are we proud of the fact that Nazism was something and fascism were something that were born in Europe and were part of Western political thought? Are we proud of the fact that communism was part of Western political thought? I mean, and what is really the East? I mean, if I accept the definition of the East, personally, I think of countries and people who are really far from Europe, that have had historically very limited contact with us, like China, for instance. I would never define the West and the East as meaning, the Islamic countries and societies and the other European societies. I think we should all make an effort to look at identities as something that is dynamic, that changes. And so looking at Turkey in the past 10 and 15 years and asking ourselves the question, is Turkey more democratic now than 15 years ago? And I would say, yes, it is. Is Turkey closer to some norms that other EU countries have established as the right norms? Yes, it is. At the same time, I could apply this same criterion to some EU members, and I could say the opposite. Is Italy more democratic now than 15 years ago? I would say no. Is Italy closer to EU norms than 15 years ago? I would say no. So again, let's not be prisoners of categories that are in constant redefinition.
Thank you, Emiliano. I already have the next three question askers, starting with this gentleman, second, third. Maybe you're four. Okay, then we're done. That's good.
All right.
Can you introduce yourself, sir? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I think I'll stand up. I'm not sure if it's working. All right, so I'm Iskender.
Can you put the mic closer to
My name is Iskender Barak, and I go to George Washington University. And I think this question might be more addressed towards Professor Kavakci, but I'm sure you guys will all have unique insights. So I've grown up in Europe for 16 years, and this is an identity question. And Europe's perception of Turkey does not, in my opinion, derive solely on what is happening in border of Turkey, but what is happening between the EU. This relates to the Turkish immigration issue. If you look at the countries that oppose Turkish membership, they tend to be Western ones, Germany, Poland, France. There are a lot of Turkish people there. So how can Turkey change European narrative if it does not focus on addressing the origin of European concerns and perceptions? In other words, what can Erdogan do to overshadow the identity displayed by immigrants in Europe, which I think people judge Turks based on how they behave in Europe, which is Turks in Europe are very different than Turks.
Thank you. Second question.
Stanley Kober with the Cato Institute. The EU is no longer the only game in town. The past couple of days, there was a meeting in China of the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa is among them. And they have said they're willing to accept new members. There is no overlap between the membership of the BRICS and the EU/NATO. So let us say the BRICS made an offer to Turkey in these circumstances. Do you think Turkey would accept, possibly at the expense of membership in the EU?
Third question.
I would like to come back to the
Could you please have the mic and introduce yourself?
I'm Senay Ken from the from the Middle East Institute. I would like to come back to the issue of the visa policy. Juliette mentioned that after 2005, the Turkish government has changed its policy, and that Turkey is going on its own and no longer will be going along with the EU policies on this. I think we need to look at this from a more broader perspective, not only from the visa perspective. If you look at in terms of the politics, there is the economic aspects, political aspects, and social aspects. Even in the economic aspects, we have to, visa policy is only one element, that is the labor market. There's the goods market, there's the capital market. Goods market, if you look at what is happening between Turkey and Middle Eastern countries, they're opening their trade, they're going to free trade with Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey. Now, 2 weeks ago, I was in Istanbul, attended a conference by the Central Bank of Turkey, where the Middle East countries' central banks and bankers associations were involved. And there, the discussion was opening and cooperating more in financial services and capital financial issues. Now, how can we have the goods market open up completely and the capital markets are opening up and integrating, and not have the visa and movement of people, inhibit the movement of people and labor? So I think it is a more broader process. It's not only a change in policy of the government to the visa issue. I think it's a more general integration issue with the neighboring countries.
Thank you very much. Fourth question. The lady in the back. Who will introduce herself, please?
Howard University. I'm kind of sympathetic with Ravza in her attempt to put Orientalism on the table and to say Orientalism is about power relations, when everybody else seems to be thinking Orientalism is a cover for something else. Well, actually, Orientalism is about power relations. It's about the ability or the right to speak and to have a place on the table. And it seems to me that the discussion that we've had on these three papers sort of demonstrates how difficult it is to do that when one is discussing Turkey. For instance, Emiliano said, as far as he's concerned, Turkey has always been part of Europe, not part of the East. But what if Turkey is part of the East? Does that mean that it has no right to speak? I think Juliette also says that the Turks are more European than the Europeans. Well, they are very assertive at this point, but with an AKP government in which the Oriental is able to speak for itself and is very confident. So one doesn't really have to be European to be confident. One can actually, and I think the changes in Turkish policy is recent changes are about this. And the issue, of course, the European Union is a very good issue to discuss as a way of demonstrating what these power relations that parade as categories, neutral categories, are all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if we can limit our last comments to 2 minutes, that would be great. And this way, all this crowds will not be copying deprived. Copy and tease in practice. Why don't we start with Juliette, going towards here, including Emiliano.
Okay, on the first question, how can Turkey change the EU narrative to kind of dissociate Turkish membership to the problem of the integration of Turkish and other Muslim communities in Europe? that's probably the question, and probably something I think the Turkish government is aware of, but doesn't really know how to deal with that. I think one of the arguments that I think is something that I'm at least really sympathetic with is that with a Turkey within the EU, which basically means a Muslim country within the EU, a lot of these integration issues will become relaxed. Like you will have, first of all, it will kind of openly say that Europe is not a European club. So the problem of integration of Muslim minorities, there is a place for Islam in Europe. So be there in Germany or be there in Turkey, it doesn't really change. Second, I think there will be a lot, at least for the Turkish community. I mean, I've met a lot of Turkish people living in Europe, being really kind of a little bit divided about the experience in Europe, not necessarily super satisfied because of integration problem, because of opportunities that they may have or may not have. And I think many of them would be really tempted to go back to Turkey. The problem is, if they do so, they know there is no way back then to Europe in case going back to Turkey is not as nice as they would have expected. So I think having Turkey in the EU will kind of relax those things where some people will come back and know that they will be able to then return if that is the case. There will be much more flexibility, and I think people will be much less nervous